Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Browse IAS.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination.
We are going to take up Delhi edition of today's paper, that is 14th of June 2020. You can see the articles we are going to cover today. Let's now begin the discussion. We'll start today's discussion with an extremely important topic, and that is of basics of border management. It obviously gets covered in GS3 security issues, but it is also important to understand various kinds of boundaries and the terms which we use for them. For example, you keep on hearing international border, line of control, basically with reference to cross-border terrorism with respect to Pakistan. Then intermittently news appears regarding AGPL or actual ground position line. And of course, since last 1 month, we are facing troubles along line of actual control. So now it becomes important for us to understand the differentiation between all of them. Then only we will be able to grasp India's border management in a better way. And this article obviously helps us in those clarifications. Now the map of the country which you see here has deliberately been plotted with dotted lines because we will first understand the boundary and try to locate them there, and then we will solidify them. So let us start with international border. Now international border, as the name suggests, is a border which has been accepted by both the countries as well as rest of the global community. So there is no doubt in anyone's mind that which territory belongs to which capital. For example, Ratcliffe Line that divided British India into India and Pakistan. So if you try to plot a Ratcliffe Line, it looks something like this. Basically, border between India and Pakistan at the time of partition. Of course, later on when Pakistan was fragmented into two parts, the current border which India shares with Bangladesh is also international border. Now if we talk about India's international border with Pakistan, it starts in Gujarat and ends at Akhnur in Jammu. Now since it is a mutually accepted borders as far as both countries are concerned, this border has normal mechanisms which the two peaceful borders and countries would place. For example, these borders are not guarded by army generally. They are guarded by border security forces from Indian side. It also has usual phenomena like land custom stations and immigration checkposts to allow entry and exit of passengers as well as cargo. Of course, since last 2 to 3 years, all these activities have been suspended, but nonetheless, under usual circumstances, this is the norm. Now there are two more components to the border between India and Pakistan, and that is line of control and actual ground position line. I hope that you might be aware that just after partition, India and Pakistan entered into a bitter war in Jammu and Kashmir. And later on, they entered into a truce and subsequently a ceasefire line which came into existence after 1947 and 48 Indo-Pak War was later on recognized as line of control. So basically what it means that just after the partition, a lot of region of state of Jammu and Kashmir was captured by Pakistan. Although Indian army pushed the Pakistani guerrillas up to a large extent, but before that ceasefire was called in. The ceasefire line was decided to be the actual position which both the armies were holding then, and hence this is what came to be known as line of actual control. So if we zoom it in, we'll see that line of actual control looks something like this, and this region beyond line of control is known as Pak occupied Kashmir. Now there are two things which are important which you should keep in mind, that line of control is a specific term used with reference to India and Pakistan only. It cannot be used for India and China. It is a ceasefire line which was later on accepted by both the armies because they signed on the agreement in Shimla Agreement, and this line is delineated on map. Now why I am saying it is important is because it will come handy when we compare the line of control with that of line of actual control. But delineation on map and having been signed by both the armies does not mean it is not disputed. It is still disputed, but both countries decided to maintain status quo until there is a peaceful resolution of the dispute of Jammu and Kashmir. Now next key term is actual ground position line. Now it divides the current position of Indian and Pakistani troops in the Siachen region. It extends from northernmost point of LOC which is NJ9842 and ends at Indrakol in the north. Now, if we try to understand this on the map, there is a point at which the line of control ends, beyond which it was not delineated. So, this northernmost point is NJ9842. And somewhere around here is Indrakol. And a straight line connecting these 2 points is actual ground position line. On western side sits Pakistan, and on the eastern side we have Siachen Glacier, which is totally controlled by our country. So if we talk about borders of India with that of Pakistan and China, these three terms are used with reference to Pakistan boundary, whereas the term line of actual control is used with respect to India-Chinese boundaries. Now, as we discussed, that line of control between India and Pakistan is delineated on a map and signed by armies of both countries. But in this case, the first thing you should notice is line of actual control between India and China remains ambiguous. If we talk about its segregation, it is divided into three sectors. The eastern sector, which spans Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. The middle sector in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. And the western sector, of course, in Ladakh. However, the line of actual control in the region of Ladakh does not converse with the political map of our country. It runs something like this, with Aksai Chin controlled by China. So as you can see, it has never been put on a map, and that leads to frequent intrusions by Chinese into Indian territories because of the differing opinions of where the actual line is. But as the time passed, the intrusions in each other's territories increased in Ladakh region. Finally, in 1993, it was felt that a time has come to put an end to this differing perception of the line of actual control because it could ultimately lead to war. And hence, both the countries signed the agreement to maintain peace and tranquility at line of actual control in 1993, and India formally accepted the line of actual control. So from the perspective of prelims examination, it becomes important to know the differentiation between international border, line of control, actual ground position line, and line of actual control. Also, this differentiation is important to understand the current context in which India and China are involved at various locations in Ladakh, the basics of which have been covered in our DNS earlier by Mangal sir and by Nagendra sir. This article which we have taken up appears on Science and Technology page, that is page number 11 in today's The Hindu newspaper. IIT Madras study reveals metabolism of key gut microbiota. We'll discuss one or two points of this study later on because most of the news articles appearing on this page number are taken from few of the journals which have just reported these results, and UPSC is highly unlikely to ask those results or scientific studies. But what is important is that we can take this as a base and clear few of our basic concepts of biotic interactions, because this study is all about the biotic interaction between our gut and gut bacteria and how they help each other, and the studies are appearing that the microbiome of our gut can be more helpful as was earlier thought. Since pre is around the corner and environment section forms a major chunk of prelims questions, it is important to clear the basics related to biotic interactions. And this is a snapshot from our Compass magazine, which has very beautifully summarized all the biotic interactions utilizing the symbols. Biotic interactions, or the interactions which various members of the living community in an ecosystem have among themselves. And they are not just one kind. Mutualism or symbiotic relationship, commensalism, amensalism, parasitism, competition, and predation. Now we shall discuss all of them one by one. But before that, even a more basic question which needs to be addressed is that why is there a need for an interaction among the species or among various members of a single species? Now, can you think of any natural habitat on the surface of the earth that is inhabited just by a single species? Is that possible? Now, to give you the answer, there is no such habitat, and such a situation is even inconceivable, because for any species, the minimal requirement is one or more species on which it can feed. But you can counter this claim by saying that what about plants? Plants don't need any species. In fact, all other species need plant. Why does this species need any other species? But you're wrong. Even a plant species which makes its own food cannot survive alone. It needs soil microbes to break down the organic matter in soil and return the inorganic nutrients for absorption. Apart from that, how will the plant manage pollination without an animal agent? So you see that even a plant which can produce its own food is heavily dependent on other species for its survival. So it is obvious that in nature, animals, plants and microbes do not and cannot live in isolation but interact in various ways to form a biological community. Now the interactions which the members of one species have with that of another is known as biotic interaction. And let me begin by first letting you understand what these plus, minus and zero signs mean. Now the positive sign means that the particular interaction which we are going to discuss is beneficial for that particular species. So for example, in the case of mutualism, both of the species derive benefits. Whereas the negative means that for species A, this particular interaction is detrimental or hazardous to that particular species. Whereas zero means that this particular species in this relationship is not deriving any benefit or is neither detrimental to that. So let us now discuss these interactions very briefly. So we'll start the discussion with a kind of interaction in which both the species derive benefit. And that is known as mutualism or symbiotic relationship. Now this is more often than not a kind of interaction where an activity performed by species A ends up helping the species B, whereas some of the functions performed by species B end up helping species A. Now, you should not think of this interaction as a voluntary or deliberate one. Let's take the example of lichens. Lichens represent a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and a photosynthesizing algae. Now, fungus, as you know, cannot produce their own food. So what they do is that they derive the carbohydrate produced by the algae. Remember that this is a photosynthesizing algae and it can produce its own food. So the association of fungus with the algae helps the fungus in the way that it derives food from the algae. Whereas the algae benefits by being protected from the environment by the filaments of the fungi, which also gathers moisture and nutrients from the environment. So you can see that this close association of both fungus and algae helps both of them, and hence they are marked by both positive signs here in mutualism. So this is one of the examples. Whereas on the other hand, another example would be leguminous plants and nitrogen fixing bacteria. Again, the same thing happens there. The nitrogen fixing bacteria help the plant by fixing the nitrogen from the atmosphere, whereas plants provide them with the food. Similarly, the process of pollination in plants. Now the insects help the plant by pollination, whereas indeed they derive food from the flowers or the nectar. So this is another example of mutualism at work. So after having understood a kind of interaction which helps both of the species who are interacting, let us now discuss one interaction where one of the species derive benefit, whereas the second one or the other partner is unaffected. And that is known as commensalism. And one of the examples of this would be an orchid growing as an epiphyte on a mango branch and barnacles growing on the back of a whale. So in both these cases, orchid and barnacles derive benefit by association with plant as well as whale respectively, whereas the whale or the plant is unaffected by such an association because they are not disturbing the plant or the whale. Another such example would be remoras eating leftover food of the shark without depleting the shark's resources. So shark is the ace predator in the ocean. But on various occasions, shark cannot finish its complete food. So that leftover is eaten by this particular species, which is not an interference because shark has already eaten up to the brim. So these are the kinds of examples where one of the species derive benefit by the association, whereas the other species is not affected by such an interaction. So it is neither beneficial nor detrimental to that particular species. Let's now discuss the mirror image of commensalism, which is known as amensalism. And in amensalism, the interaction leads to detrimental effect on one of the species, whereas it leaves another one unimpacted. So for example, there is an organism which secretes toxic chemicals, and these toxic chemicals are secreted because this particular organism has to perform some specific function. And what this chemical does is that it inhibits the growth of another particular organism. Now, in this case, this particular organism is not being affected, whereas the second organism is actually being destroyed by this interaction because of the dangerous impacts of this chemical. And hence, this is amensalism. And this particular interaction where the secretion by one plant leads to inhibition of the other is known as allelopathy. This is an important term to be remembered from the perspective of UPSC examination. Now, another very simple demonstration of amensalism: when two plants from different species start to grow together, but one plant outgrows the other and it blocks the sunlight, which is detrimental for this plant. So these two are very specific examples of amensalism. Now, next interaction is extremely important because this is the one which affects us most, and that is known as parasitism. Now, parasitism is defined by a kind of interaction in which one of the species derive benefits, whereas it is extremely detrimental to the another one. Now, if you're looking carefully on the screen, you might ask that parasitism also has a combination of plus and minus, and predation also has a combination of plus and minus. So what is actually the difference between these two? Now, in case of predation, the survival of the another species is finished at the time of the hunt. So for example, if a lion is hunting a deer, the deer is killed on the spot. But in case of parasitism, the parasite does not always lead to the killing of the other species. So for example, a very good demonstration would be a parasite in case of humans. So for example, if there is a bacteria, let's say E. coli, and if it comes into our body, then it's not like we are immediately dead. Although if not treated, we might eventually die. But until that time, that bacteria will derive benefits from association with our body, whereas our body will gradually be weakened. So naturally, you can think of two such kinds of parasites. Some of the parasites, for example, you must have seen dogs with a lot of ticks. So the kinds of parasites which feed on the external surface of a host organism are called ectoparasites. Whereas the endoparasites are those that live inside the host body at different sites, for example, in blood, lungs, kidneys, or even livers. Now, we shall not go into further details of parasitism, but it is very important to mention here that most of the parasites have evolved to be host specific. That is, that they have become so specific that they can parasitize only a single species of host in such a way that both host and parasite tend to co-evolve. That is, if the host evolves special mechanisms for rejecting or resisting the parasite, for example, in case of humans, we evolve immunity once we get infected, but at the same time, the parasite also evolve mechanism to counteract and neutralize the immunity in order to be successful with the same host species at a later date. That is why you must have heard that vaccines made for a particular disease become inactive because the bacteria itself has evolved. Let us now move on to a very important and most commonly visible biotic interaction, that is competition, which leads to the detrimental effect to both the species. And the best example is two kinds of predators in a single habitat. For example, the existence of lion and tiger in the same jungle will lead to a lot of pressure on both these species because they share the common prey. Now, you should keep in mind that although we have so far discussed the biotic interaction between two separate species, but the competition also affects the members of the same species. So for example, if there are 100 lions in a single jungle, then each one of them is also competing against the members of the same lion community for the same prey food, because the food which jungle can supply is limited. So the biotic interaction known by the name of competition is not limited to the members of different species. It also occurs within the community as well. And finally, we come to the predation. As we have discussed, it is different from parasitism, in which the one organism which derives the positive benefit completely eats up and finishes the life of the other. And the best example is our top predators, for example, lion, bear, and foxes in case of jungle, shark in case of ocean, and eagles in case of atmosphere. So these are the 6 kinds of biotic interactions, and it is important for you to not only memorize the kind of impact which they have on the interacting species, but also try to memorize at least 2 examples of each one of them. So moving on to the 2 important takeaways from this particular article which appears on Science and Technology page is the first thing you should be aware of a term known as probiotics. Now, probiotics are basically a mixture of live bacteria and in some cases yeast that are good for our body, especially our digestive systems. And they are usually prescribed by the doctors to treat or heal the digestive disorders which one might have. So just like any other ecosystem, our stomach is also an ecosystem. And it is believed that there are a lot of microorganisms which thrive in our gut system and help to digest our food. Although these claims are not scientifically well established, and this study is in that direction itself, but generally probiotics are promoted with claims that they provide health benefits when consumed, generally by improving or restoring the gut flora. Now, just like any other ecosystem, the human gut microbiome has a huge number of beneficial bacteria which are living in it. Now, the most important among them is Bifidobacterium, and there are two species of the same bacteria. Now, the first one is B. logum or Bifidobacterium logum, which is usually found in adult guts, and Bifidobacterium bifidum, which is found in infants. So, you can see that as the person grows, the microbiome or the ecosystem inside the stomach also changes as it leads to the transition of the species of the bacteria itself. Let's now move on to the next news, which appears on page number 1. Nepal passes amendment on new map. So just yesterday, that is on Saturday, the lower house of Nepal's parliament unanimously voted for second constitutional amendment bill. Now this constitutional amendment bill was brought in to provide legal status for new political map which they have created unilaterally. As a sovereign country, in fact, everyone has right to produce their own map. But the trouble is that this new political map of Nepal conflicts with the map which we have created for ourselves. And on top of that, the map created by Nepal also does not conforms to the ground realities. So in order to first understand what this trouble is all about, let us cover first some historical perspectives. Now the western margins of the Nepal, or the border between Nepal and India on the western front, was defined by Treaty of Sogoli signed by Nepal and British East India Company in 1816, which defined the border as Kali River. As you can see in the map, Kali River can be seen flowing, and that is the international border. Now you might ask that if the boundary is so well defined, where is the problem? Now there are many ways to define an international border, and rivers are one of them. But there are two particular problems when we decide that this river is going to be a boundary between these two nations or states. Now the first problem is that rivers frequently change their path, and as you can see on the screen, this particular river has changed this much course in a matter of 10 to 15 years. And you can imagine that this treaty was signed in 1816, which is about 200 years ago. And now we can say literally that a lot of water has gone under the bridge in 200 years. So obviously once it was decided that Kali River will be international border, then the river itself has changed the course, which might lead to the confusion. And also, I would like you to focus on this particular sketch where you can see a lot of mountains basically denoting Himalayas. You know that in the upper reaches, it is very difficult to mark the exact stream which will finally become the Kali River, because there are a lot of points from where the water is emerging continuously. And hence it becomes very difficult in the upper reaches of the river to demarcate the exact origination point of a river. Now, if this is Nepal and this is India, Nepal would always want to claim this point as the source of Kali River, because if this becomes the source, then this whole territory east of this point will become Nepalese territories. Whereas India would always want to claim this point as a source of Kali River to claim the whole territory. So this is the difference of interpretation given in Treaty of Sogoli, which is creating problem right now. Now you should not think that this is a peculiar situation between India and Nepal. This trouble over defining the exact boundary emerges in almost all the countries which have defined river as their international border. So as we have just understood, ultimately the boundary between India and Nepal shall be decided by where actually the perception of the actual origin of the river Kali will be according to both the nations. Because as soon as the origination of Kali is decided, all the location east of that in that watershed shall be claimed by Nepal, and the west of that shall be claimed by India. Now, as per Kathmandu's understanding, the river originates from Limpeadhura in higher Himalayas. So let's have a closer look at where it actually belongs. So as you can see that this is a map and this is that of a Kali River. But these regions do not create any trouble because The path of the Kali River is well defined. The problem starts because in the upper reaches of Greater Himalayas, it's very difficult to find out from where actually the river emerges. Now, as we just discussed, Kathmandu thinks that the river originates from Limpeadhura in higher Himalayas. Now, let's see which of the three locations are Limpeadhura. So, you can see that how Nepal has considered the westernmost location as its origination point because that will yield maximum advantage to Nepal as far as the boundary is concerned. Now, since it considers this to be an origination point, the political map, which has just been finalized by the Nepal and approved by the lower house, gives it access to a triangular shaped land defined by Limpeadhura, Lipulekh, and Kalapani. And if you look, this piece of land looks something like this. So the current international boundary between India and Nepal is marked by this solid line. But the new map of Nepal has this extra territory which somewhat looks like this. Now this next article appears on page number 12, which happens to be a FAQ page. Can a COVID-19 vaccine be developed soon? Now, in order to understand why does it take so much time for a successful vaccine to arrive on the horizon, you need to understand the process of a development of vaccine. Now, let me clear at the outset, it is not very important from the perspective of both prelims as well as mains examination. But since interviews are about to start, and for all those candidates who are appearing in an interview, they could be asked to explain the reasons for the delay in the arrival of vaccine. So first we will understand the traditional paradigm, which is a normal course of action, not like COVID-19 pandemic situation. So for example, development of a vaccine for HIV or any other disease, which is not a public emergency as of now. So generally what happens is a candidate vaccine, which is yet not finalized, goes through three phases of trial: phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Now we'll talk about them in a very succinct manner. Now you have to understand that vaccine is basically a solution which could be a weakened biological or a synthetic agent like RNA, DNA, or protein or any other kind of antigen as well. Now, just like any other foreign body inserted in our blood, we need to take extreme precaution before the vaccine is licensed for large scale production. So the overall emphasis on all the phases of trial is to check the effectivity, that is, whether the vaccine was able to prevent the occurrence of disease in the persons who were administered with the vaccine in the trial phases, and whether the vaccine was safe or not. But there should be some difference between phase 1, 2, and 3, right? So the major difference between these phases are the sample sizes. And as we go towards the higher phases, the sample size increases. So to start with, in the phase 1 trial, the vaccine is administered to few chosen healthy and fit individuals. An extensive testing is done on them to find out whether they have any immunocompromising situation or not, whether they have an earlier exposure to the similar disease or not. And usually the phase 1 trials are conducted within a vicinity or closed spaces of a tertiary or a high level lab. These candidates who voluntarily put themselves for humanity are kept under very, very close observations with respect to their health conditions. And the main focus of the phase 1 trial is on safety, whether or not this vaccine induces any negative side effects. But at the same time, the effectivity or whether the antibodies have been generated in the person or not, that is also monitored. Once the vaccine clears the phase 1 trial, it enters into phase 2 trial. And since it has already been tested to be safe in the phase 1, now the sample size increases. So earlier we were focusing on fit and healthy young individuals. But in the phase 2 trials, the sample size is broadened with respect to age, ethnicity, and gender. And the main emphasis of phase 2 trial is try to identify the age of first administration of the vaccine, number of vaccine doses will it be needed, and duration of immunity being induced by the vaccine, whether it is lifelong or it goes away after some time. So all these things are tried to be identified in the phase 2 trials. And finally, the large-scale phase 3 trials are conducted in just like normal situation. It is administered to a large section of population over large geography. For example, 1,000 people in each district across the country. Because after the phase 2 trial, it is established that the vaccine is safe and it is effective. Now the task is to actually simulate the field condition. For example, when a vaccine is manufactured in the lab and goes to a primary healthcare unit, there could be certain duration of time it would not be refrigerated. Whether those kinds of factors affect the efficacy of vaccine or not. After the data of phase 3 trials are analyzed and it is found to be effective in the actual real situations, it enters the licensing phase. Now, this is a normal course of action for any other disease, but COVID is, of course, unlike any other. So, normally, manufacturing scale up, commercial scale, and validation process start after it is seen that the vaccine is proving good in phase 2 trials. Because for phase 3 trials, we would be needing a lot of vaccines, and that is why manufacturing scale up occurs after phase 2. But look at COVID 19. Even before the first trials in humans began, manufacturing scale up occurred well before that because everyone anticipated the kind of scale the COVID 19 is going to be. And even before it will enter into phase 3 trial, large scale manufacturing would have started. We want to minimize this time gap because if the countries and the companies wait for the phase 3 trial to end and then start the manufacturing on a large scale, it would already be very late. So what companies across the world are doing, that they are entering into contracts mainly with Indian companies for scale up even before the results have come up. This is a risk and a big one on their own behalf. But everyone knows that if either of the candidates right now, then it will prove to be one of the biggest boon to humanity. This last news which we are going to take up appears on page number 7. Returning laborers may be deployed for Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, Jal Shakti Ministry, the nodal ministry for the implementation of the scheme, has written to various states that returning laborers, especially those working in construction sector, whether skilled or unskilled, may be deployed to expedite the completion of the works under scheme. Now, this will work as an arrangement that could provide employment to the currently unemployed workers due to COVID-19 situation. So, this also gives us opportunity to visit Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, in one line, the main objective of Jal Jeevan Mission is to provide piped drinking water to rural households and all the rural households by 2024. Now, there are two things which are key from the perspective of prelims examination, and those two terms are source sustainability measures and community approach. Now, ensuring the sustainability of the water resources is extremely important, and hence one of the tasks of Jal Jeevan Mission would be to ensure the sustainability, for example, through water conservation and rainwater harvesting. And the overall mechanism through which Jal Jeevan Mission will be implemented will be community approach. And one of the pillars shall be awareness creation through IEC mechanism or information, education and communication. Now, if you recall, one of the similar schemes was Manrega, in which certain days of guaranteed employment is provided to rural persons. And similarly, Jal Jeevan Mission is also well placed to provide rural employment. And there are 4 solid reasons for it. Now, first and foremost, currently there is a huge demand for work because of COVID-19 situation and returning migrant laborers. And hence, they need to be employed somewhere. There is no dearth of cash and funds for this particular mission. Because apart from 11,000 crore which was allocated earlier, Rupees 12,000 crore have been added extra apart from these 11,000 crore. And hence, the supply of cash is not a problem, and hence, it depends upon villages how much work they can get done under this mission. Then one of the conditions put forth by 15th Finance Commission comes very handy for Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, if you remember the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission, it allocated 60,000 crores for rural local bodies. But half of that amount was tied to a condition that was conditional, and that condition was taking steps toward restoration of water bodies and sanitation, mainly Swachh Bharat. So this will work in favor of Jal Jeevan Mission. And finally, that this is one of those fields where there is plenty of skill available in the rural areas, because the skill mapping by various state government has shown that a majority of interstate workers returning home are from the construction sector, and it will not be difficult for them to get absorbed into Jal Jeevan Mission. It's time now for revision from the perspective of prelims examination. This snapshot of Compass magazine has been given in the PDF. Keep it with yourself because it summarizes very beautifully all the important biotic interactions, namely mutualism and symbiotic relationship, commensalism, amensalism, parasitism, competition, and predation. Keep in mind these numeral signs because it makes them very easy to memorize. Probiotics are mixtures of helpful bacteria which are often given by the doctors to solve various digestive disorders. And human gut is like an ecosystem. It has a lot of flora over there, and some of the most common bacteria belong to Bifidobacterium, B. logum in adults, and B. bifidium in infants. In India Nepal article, it is important to keep in mind Treaty of Sogoli, Kali River, and how the origination point of Kali River has led to the debate between India and Pakistan related to the political map. Keep in mind that Nepal has added an extra triangular land in this part of the country. Also try to recall the three places which we have discussed. One of them is Lepulek Pass, next one is Kalapani, and you have to comment about the third one. Then in the border management, it is important to keep in mind important distinctions between international border, line of control, actual ground position line, and line of actual control. Main difference between line of control and actual control is that of lack of delineation on map. Then we have Jal Jeevan Mission, and it is important to remember that it will provide piped drinking water to all rural households by 2024, at the same time ensuring source sustainability measures through community approach. For solving rest of the questions, please go to our eLearn website, register for free, make a free basic account and solve all the questions. The question of the day for 13th of June 2020 was, which of the following statements about Lonar Lake is our correct? Statement 1, it is the only impact crater found in India, which is incorrect. Statement 2, it is located in Madhya Pradesh, which is also incorrect, leads us to the right answer D, neither 1 nor 2. The question of the day for today is, consider the following statements regarding Jal Jeevan Mission. Statement 1, it aims to provide piped drinking water to all households by 2024. Statement 2, at least 50% of manpower must come from skilled workers trained under National Skill Development Mission. Option A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, D, neither 1 nor 2. Stay home, stay safe, take care.